Notice. Hi, Stu. Okay. All right. I just want to welcome you. I'm Brian Engler. Everybody, well, most of you perhaps know me. Welcome to Kevin, our new deputy director. And who else is here now? Let's see. Priscilla, Sujatha, Sue, Suzanne, me. Okay.
And you also have on hand Doug Miller, who is the library strategic planning expert extraordinaire.
Good to know.
That's not his actual title. It's just, you know, it's like a
crown. It's going to be my actual title now.
It will be, yeah. Okay. Well,
everybody.
I wanted to welcome everybody here. As you know, we have this strategic plan, which I hope you had a chance to look at online. I downloaded it and turned it into kind of a PowerPoint thing. It's easier for me to look at. It was written about 6 years ago, but it's active now. Its fifth year is ending here at this year, and I looked at it and I think it's fine, but we're required to look every 5 years by the state, right? For at least review our strategic plan and reissue it perhaps as a new one. And the county put out a strategic plan fairly recently, which ours, I think, does a good job of following, but isn't exactly in the same form. So I don't know whether Jessica, you want to talk about that, or Doug, how you're going to take a look at.
So I'll do a little intro and then I'll turn it over to Doug, because Doug has been not only integral to our own process, he's been a key player in the county strategic planning process and in coordinating agency plans with the county plan. So like Brian mentioned, we are required by the Library of Virginia to have our own individual strategic plan to be eligible for state aid. And we tend to do, a 5 or 6 year plan. So it's got some legs to it. And the last iteration that we did of this was really intended to be an evergreen document that, like many of you have seen me flag this lovely poster before. We have these in all of our branches. It's got our mission, our vision, our values, all those good things on it. And so many of them are probably unlikely to change. It's not like we're going to say literacy is no longer important to us. We're done with that particular focus area.
It's number 3 instead of number 1.
Yeah, it's really shifting priority areas. However, there are additional focus areas that might crop up that have kind of gained some additional traction over the duration of the current plan. Areas like intellectual freedom that we are seeing more and more challenges to, digital equity, and an even stronger emphasis on access, not only to our physical spaces, but to our digital realm because of the pandemic. Doug and I have received a number of names of folks who want to participate on a staff committee. And we're hoping that a similar process to the last go round, where we have parallel tracks where a staff committee is reviewing documentation and making recommendations up to this board for review, edits, and hopeful approval, will work out so that you all are able to provide feedback on staff expertise and areas that you really want folks to take a deeper dive onto, but so that staff feel really invested when we have an end product as well. So that's kind of my little overview. Doug, would you like to share a little bit about the county process and what we anticipate coming up?
Sure. So it's a pretty extensive plan that they have. And a couple of us library individuals were on strategic committees to help form that plan. They are in the process right now of doing what they call crosswalk, and the library is one of their pilot agencies to look at the plan and see where we can mesh our own strategic plan with the county plan. And of the 10 community areas that they have listed, 2 really apply to us. Of course, the lifelong education and learning area, and then the cultural recreation opportunities do as well. What I think the county is interested in doing is having agencies take a closer look at the other areas that may not be as readily obvious to where they would play a role in helping the county meet their goals. For instance, we offer all kinds of programming and some of that has to do with, let's say, finance or economic aspects of everyday life, that could play a role in the county's community area of economic opportunity. So there may be a point at which they ask us to count that type of number of programs that we offer in those areas. But the big ones for us, of course, are the learning and the cultural opportunities. But that process has really just started with the county. We're one of, I think, 3 agencies that are looking at it and doing what they're referring to as a crosswalk. What is it that's being done out there now to give the deputy county executives an idea of what's actually taking place? What have individual agencies done so far that match up well with the county plan, and using that basic information, kind of figure out the next steps for everybody in the county, all agencies to follow in order to align what they do at the agency level with what the county wants to do.
And I'll jump in real quick here. Of critical importance to us is the fact that for future budget cycles, new budget requests are going to be tied to strategic planning initiatives and idea areas. So at this point, if we go forward and we say the library really needs a social worker position, if you think back 3 or 4 years, we would just draft like a little 1-pager that says, here's why, please give us money. And then the last couple of years, we've had to tie into One Fairfax principles. How does this budget request make sense within kind of a racial and social equaling space? But it is intended that going forward in some way, it's going to be the next budget cycle, so it's not as clear this go around. How will our future budget asks tie into some kind of strategic plan area? And like Doug said, we're really lucky because we have a lot of easy pulls between lifelong learning and education, community and recreational opportunities, and even efficient and effective government, which is kind of the broad arch one. There are a lot of places there. So on the county side of things, we want to make sure that whatever our new strategic plan really easily arrows up to that so that we can ask for more money when it's appropriate. And for staff, whatever our internal document looks like, it needs to be easily digestible for them instead of maybe the 90+ page document that the county has, which is super helpful, but very, very lengthy.
Okay, Jessica and I had talked a little bit about this a while ago, and I think probably the best way forward, correct me if I'm wrong, would be to have this staff committee work on that crosswalk and then come to this committee with what they have or have found or suggest. Is that correct? And then this committee can look at that, rather than, we're all volunteers, so we don't have access to all that stuff. The other thing I would suggest to Doug and whoever else is on that staff committee is that we really do favor our current plan to the extent we can. In other words, if there's something in our plan that ties to the new one, let's say that instead of rewording it and starting from scratch. I'm never in favor of taking strategic plans, tossing them out, and then building a new one. It just doesn't make a lot of sense to me, but I don't know, maybe it does to other people in the committee, and I'm open for other suggestions too. So
Yeah,
what do you think?
This is your committee, and in the end, the strategic plan is a board document that staff follow.
Yeah.
So we will do whatever you all like.
Okay.
One of the things that we had hoped to garner staff-wise from this first committee meeting is any additional areas that committee members would like staff to initially focus on. So, we had tossed out intellectual freedom because there is so much activity around there right now. But are there other areas that you've noticed during your time on the library board or just as community members that link to the library that we should put a greater emphasis on? And as a reminder, our current focus areas are access, innovation, civic engagement, technology, and literacy. So it doesn't have to be 5. That just like a handy fit on a poster.
Yeah.
But really, where do you want our staff, if we're not doing like a whole refresh of this thing, where do you want staff to put additional energy?
Well, I'll speak first and I'll let the others speak whenever they want, because I had thought about this, but we discussed it. Digital equity is absolutely important, but to me, we've already focused on access and we've done a lot to get better access. and then things change and we have to close on Sundays and Mondays and stuff like that. But at least things are more or less equitable across libraries. Now, at least people can say the library is open this time and not this time. So, but we still don't have that full access that the citizen committee, whatever we called it, wanted to do. And I think that's something we have to do. But the intellectual freedom, or whatever you want to call it, to me is number one, especially with this cancellation down in Tennessee of this wonderful book, Marilyn and stuff like that. So good book. I just really am worried about that, especially with new governor and people around, that we're going to be pushed once they stop pushing the schools. And I will not do that. I will not stand for any banning of books. I don't know about anybody else, but that just does not work, I don't think, for a public library, and we can't allow that to work. So I think that's extremely important. Other than that, anybody else want to discuss anything?
You had hands up from Sujatha and
Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't see the hands up. There we go. Okay.
No. I lowered my hand when you were talking because he said,
Oh,
to you, no problem.
you were just waving it.
To reiterate, or just to put an underscore on what you just said, I think that they're considering that we review in 5-year increments. We can anticipate from what we see that in the next 5 years, this is going to be more and not less important, and more and not less important to protect. If you look around the county at various boards, commentary on various boards, public commentary, and then board response, you can see what's on our horizon. And if we don't protect these, values, while we can protect these values, we don't have documents in place for staff, for library staff, to lean into when they need to protect our books and our community access. So since we already have the access one, right? Since we already have that as one of our goals, it's insufficient. What I'm saying is, I believe it's insufficient. It's not sufficiently clear and sufficiently definitive to allow staff to lean into that. And that includes in schools, because we know we have, it's a dangerous situation that only, that the chances are it escalates long before it de-escalates. That's what concerns me. So I think that we need to have language that is much more clear for staff to lean into, to protect themselves and protect our community and protect our collection.
Okay, great. That's a good idea. And maybe the word is, maybe intellectual freedom isn't the right word. Maybe it does go under access. Maybe it's separate. We can work on that with the staff when they come up with ideas.
Yeah, Brian, just for us to continue this conversation, it is absurd in 2022 for anybody to ban a book anywhere, because you can get it overnight to your house. I'm sure Mouse is now like skyrocketed, and I mean,
probably. I'm glad I have my copy.
Lawn Boy. Nobody has thought about those books for years, and those authors got a big boon by these bannings, right? Which it's absurd. So basically what I'm saying is, since it is absurd, it's operationally absurd. It doesn't serve a purpose beyond making a political argument.
Oh, sure.
Right? Because everybody can get these books and everybody knows we can get these books. So it's just to say, I don't care what you think, we're going to continue to do this, right? So it is, the point being, we're supposed to be protecting the values, but also protecting the people and protecting the collections. So that's all I'm saying.
Great. Suzanne, did you have something?
Yeah, Jessica mentioned business being something that's in the county plan. And it occurs to me, we used to have a vibrant business collection. It was a separate department in the library. And I know there's some periodicals. I tend to get access to periodicals, and then I go to and you have to pay a subscription. So I immediately go to the library and read the New Yorker articles online, but there's one like Washington Business Review, which seems to have a lot of local business that we don't seem to have access to. And so I would like to perhaps, if that's part of the county plan, maybe have staff relook at what business materials we have and if we need to beef some things up. And I
Okay.
know that takes money.
No, it sure does. And we, as a little sidebar, we assess every year usage on databases and then, reorganize money and how we buy them. However, as a broader picture area, something like economic development could be an area that you all may want to consider as a focal point for the library. If you think about the value that libraries bring in times when communities are in a recession, helping people develop job skills, providing opportunities for free access to things that they can't pay. We're not in a recession right now, but during a pandemic, we have provided many of those same job skill development areas. That may be something that we can rewrite to the staff committee and see what they come back with.
Another thing that comes to mind is the Virginia Room has had a publication called the Fairfax Newsletter for many, many years. It's kind of a development related thing and it covers planning issues. And in the many years ago budget cuts, they had to drop that. So the Friends of the Virginia Room have been providing it at a cost of $300 and some a year. We just found out it's now being sold to libraries for $1,420 a year, which takes it really out of the realm of the Friends of the Virginia Room's ability to pay for. And, that's the kind of thing the staff says people still do come in and ask for it. Used to be in every branch when it was $100 a year. But, maybe relook at some of those things that have local value.
Okay, we can also ask staff to look at kind of system versus local opportunities and how that might tie into different strategic planning areas.
Right.
And what's going to be interesting, Suzanne, is with the county working through how exactly they're going to have their plan work. There are a lot of metrics that they have tied to each individual community area, all of which are currently labeled as perspective or draft, because they just don't know what they want to collect and use to measure the success of meeting their goals. But the tie into the budget that Jessica mentioned is that if the county decides that an area they want to focus on has something to do with providing information about business to the community, we're the right avenue to do that. And so it kind of gives us a hook to be able to get the funding you mentioned that's needed to do things like provide that newsletter or any other materials that helps the county then meet their goal.
Okay.
Exactly. Thanks.
Thank you, Suzanne. Are you done?
Yep.
Priscilla?
So as I'm processing the conversation around economics and intellectual freedom, I'm finding some connections in the sense that adding to what Sujatha mentioned, ultimately an access issue, I think, for intellectual freedom in a public library is a key component that needs to have some clarity of language, because we are making an assumption perhaps that there are people who have the means to have access to books if they have to be paid for. So I think is part of the connection between intellectual freedom and the core mission of the library. I do think it would be helpful to explain the difference in the need for access to things that are perhaps controversial or sensitive along those lines. And in addition to that, the library has a strong and robust policy around privacy. And that is another access issue, because if you are concerned about your privacy of what information you are accessing, then you may have very few avenues beyond the library to access information under that umbrella and protection of privacy. And that privacy protection does not extend to schools. So I'm also, of course, I'm always thinking about our younger citizens in Fairfax County who might have some restrictions into access of information and would seek out the privacy aspects. So I think my overall recommendation is I'm leaning more on the access part, but kind of maybe fleshing that out. Most importantly is clarity of language has to be very unambiguous in my mind, because that's the strength of the argument, is to express that rationale.
Okay, great.
Brian, can I jump in real quick?
Oh, yes, ma'am.
So I agree with everything that you all are saying. I think part of our thought process with the last round of strategic planning was to provide a really broad arch, because each of our individual branches and divisions were creating their own goals and objectives annually based on this. And we didn't have quite as much high level beyond the library interest in some of the things that we had going on maybe 5 or 6 years ago. Providing an additional kind of deeper dive on some of the tenets that we have makes a lot of sense. And I was poking around a little bit on the site. I read a manga years ago called Library Wars. I don't know if anyone else has read that or knows of that. And
I've heard of
it's a Japanese comic book series. And the whole premise of it is that in the near future, the government puts together a committee that gets rid of books that it thinks are unsuitable, and that the librarians are tasked with protecting their collections along with community folks and local governments. They have like a militia that is not only like intellectually protecting their materials, but like out there like fighting for it. And we're not, hopefully, anywhere close to that point in time, but there is this consistent and rising level of broader community interest in the materials that are made available to community members through libraries, because we're tax funded, public libraries. And as many times as we say that every book is not for every person, but there is a book out there for everyone, that message doesn't always hit home. And folks get really uncomfortable with some of the items that are in our collections that are not the best fit for them or for their families. So finding some better terminology around intellectual freedom and accessibility of those resources and the implicit privacy and confidentiality that a public library must afford you, I think will be an interesting process for staff to have a discussion around, and then to filter back up to this group, because, some staff get really kind of excited around this topic, and it needs to be something that, staff can defend, but that makes sense if you're a general member of the public reading it too.
Thank you. Yeah, and I appreciate the clarity of language idea there too, because people like us, we talk about this, and I think we all are pretty much in the same mindset of and understand, and librarians would understand that. But if the public has to understand it, I've been reading some responses Jessica's had to make to some public people through my supervisor, and it's hard. Jessica says stuff, and I go, "Well, this should be perfectly clear," and it's never clear to this guy. I don't know. But anyway, they have to be made to understand in very simple terms sometimes.
Yeah, and
does anyone else? Yeah.
Yeah.
Does anyone else have anything to say? Kevin, have you thought about this at all? As I put you on the spot here.
Yes. I had to write a 5-year plan on the fly at my last situation because I inherited a position where the 5-year mark was due in like a month when I started. So ours was a little bit slapdash, but I would say that the board has done most of the heavy lifting already previously in terms of talking to the community and getting a real feel for what's going on. A lot of the times when a strategic plan is put together, there's like a disconnect from the planners and the people living in the place. And in my reading of the plan and the county's plans, it seems like the big lift is done, and you as the trustees understand the communities you serve. So at this point, it's real. We're just kind of like, we're sharpening the blade. We're just making it a little more perfect for the next 5 years because it's already really good. So, I mean, that's my take. I don't see any glaring things that are like, hey, we really need to whatever. But I do agree, as we're dealing with situations like the Rappahannock County thing and book burnings, whatever, it's important to come up with phrasing that explains where we as a county and as a library stand on issues like that, but also do it in a way that we don't find ourselves trotting into what becomes hot button language. You know, certain words out of nowhere develop a new context when politically they start to mean something different. And I think we can kind of see over the horizon line to what is becoming hot buttoned, and we can just do our best to you know, zhuzh our language to make sure that we're addressing the issue without giving any one person ammunition to make a mountain out of a molehill.
Okay, that's great, and I'm very happy to hear as an outside sort of perspective coming in that you think that deep dive we took last time, which was actually before I was on the board, although I was on the foundation board, so I actually helped with some of the surveys we did, but that was, I'm sure it cost a lot of money, and it was really good, and I'm glad we don't have to do that again. I think we've got a really good feel of what the community wants and appreciates, and for the most part, it should be the same. Of course, things do change, as we all know, but if we can just take the pieces where there could be a problem, like Sujatha said, over the next 5 years, and make those a little better, I think we're in great shape. So now, Jessica, what would you say? Are you going to be getting the staff committee together soon, or are they already together to do this? And when do you think this committee might see something that we can actually look at in conjunction with our current plan and say, this is looking like a new strategic plan, or like an updated strategic plan?
Absolutely. So Doug and I have received a list of staff that were interested in participating. It is more than we needed, which is great, and has probably more managers on the list than would be a good balance. So we're going to have to slim the pickings a little bit on that. But the hope is to get that staff group together sometime in the next couple weeks, February-ish, so that they can start working on the points that you've brought forward. The last go around, we had maybe every 6 or 8 weeks committee meetings. So staff would bring forward a piece so that they could confirm that they were on the right track, that we were looking at the things that you all wanted. So I would guess that this committee will probably meet again in March if you all are available via Zoom, obviously.
Yeah, makes some sense. Yeah.
And I did have one additional comment, just as a note as you're thinking about this. Because there are so many hot button topics right now, the library is finding itself in the crosshairs with really specific communities, people who don't think that they're reflected in the services that we offer. So if I were to like big picture extrapolate, folks that maybe are on the more conservative side are finding themselves upset by some of the more kind of liberal things that are in the collection and wonder where their taxpayers' dollars are going and if they can see themselves in the programs, services, and materials that we have. And I want to ensure that, we all think about as we process this, the library is here for everyone. We buy materials that hit every spectrum of the range of stuff that's published. We offer programs that should be welcoming to everyone in the community, and our staff are ready to help everybody, as long as they follow the library's appropriate behavioral guidelines. Cannot curse at, spit at, or do other inappropriate things to staff or other members of the public. But as we're drafting this, these documents are not meant to be like, we're supporting intellectual freedom because this little tiny group of books isn't something that people want to see. We're protecting the whole collection, that there are things on both sides that folks may be unhappy or uncomfortable with. Your own board policy talks about the fact that a book that may be not the right fit, uncomfortable, or ill-written to one person is the perfect fit for someone else who's doing research, or it fits in with their ideology. And I just want to put that out there, that it is for everyone. This plan is for everyone. The library is for everyone. And that however we phrase the documents that come out of this, it offers protections for everyone, even if it doesn't feel like it in the moment when one particular group is feeling the pinch on things. Yeah,
no, I appreciate that. And even more than the collection, we already had the discussion, a year or so ago, when we had that big kerfuffle about what the library was highlighting on its homepage. We have to make sure that we don't we highlight things that go with month, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, but we can't have, say, all liberal things at the top and then no other stuff.
Well, and it
for
depends on
example, would
community
be-
interest. It depends on
Yeah,
community interest and
Oh,
value
I
in the
know,
moment
I know.
too. Yeah, I know.
But,
We're not.
Uh,
We don't have to
yeah,
argue about
I think our collection's in good shape to the extent it can be. I mean, we always are getting new stuff, but I
We'll always
think
take more
also we
booklet.
have to be careful what we highlight for certain groups. That's
Yeah, yeah, and it's not even that point. It's that I think that because things continue to be so politicized in our everywhere, I don't even know how to frame that. Everywhere continues to be so
Yeah.
politicized.
Yeah.
The library is getting shoehorned into a space. The public library is getting shoehorned into a space where people think that there's purposeful politicization of it, that the library is here to only defend like
Oh.
rights for these people. And that's not true. We're here to
Yeah,
support
yeah.
everyone in the community.
Okay.
And that just
So
happens.
that has to be
hire
expressed.
some small
Yeah.
groups.
Yeah. So what you're saying is not so much that we aren't representing everybody, it's that people don't understand that. So that has to be expressed in the whole idea of access and equity and so on. You mentioned One Fairfax earlier. That's still part of the county plan, right?
Oh,
So-
yeah, yeah. One
I mean,
Fairfax,
Yeah, okay.
the social and
Yeah,
racial.
as long as they
equity
haven't
plans.
changed. So if we
Mhm.
use the terminology, we don't have to shift or something.
Yeah, the whole county plan was put together with what they referred to as an equity lens. So
Yeah, okay, good,
basically,
good.
everything that got considered that's in the plan was done through that
Yeah.
type of an aspect.
Right.
There's not a One Fairfax like initiative in there or goal in there, that kind of thing. It's more the stated goal to think about everything that we do in that,
Yeah.
through that lens.
Yeah, but expressing that to people on both sides of the issue, in other words, sometimes things like One Equity are viewed by certain people as focusing only on the minorities, for example. Okay, so they're getting all the benefits, I'm not getting any benefits. So we have to make sure that they understand, we're here for everybody, and we'll answer your questions and treat you the same as long as you wear a mask.
Yes,
Yeah.
please and thank you. Please keep wearing masks in
Right,
county
right.
buildings.
Stu, did
It's
you
kinda
have
like
anything
Kevin-
to say?
it's like Kevin
saw that
mentioned.
you. Oh, I'm sorry.
I'm sorry. It's like Kevin mentioned, equity has become one of those words that
Yeah.
all of a sudden has different meanings.
Right.
And you can explain it however you want, but there's
Yeah.
always going to be some people who look at it in their own
Oh, I
way.
know. Well, I grew up in the 50s and 60s. I'm older than anybody else on here, and so maybe not, Suzanne. I looked down there and I wasn't going to say anything, but I saw you shaking your head. But at any rate, well, you and I know that these words have always had issues. As soon as you start talking about equality, you're saying, well, yeah, you want to lift these people up, but that's going to push me down, which is not true. But so anyway, Sue, you had your hand up. Yes, ma'am.
Yes,
And then
going along the words, and I definitely have learned, I love this discussion about these hot topic words, especially how they've taken on more meaning or different meanings. Going back to what Jessica was bringing up about some certain people not feeling maybe represented, do you have any suggestions as to how we could alleviate that and make it more equal or more, I don't know.
So that is a really big question. And it depends on what angle we come at it. So in the example I was using, really at this point, a lot of the complaints and concerns that we get, both to branches and library administration, are that folks who maybe fall on a more conservative side of the spectrum don't feel like they are reflected in the tax dollars that go into their library system. And so when we offer things like the fact that we celebrate Pride in June and we have books and materials and displays for that, they want to know if we're going to do a similar initiative for Veterans Day, or if we will do something like religiously themed story times. And we do those things. We do have opportunities for people that are interested to participate in their library in a way that is reflective of their interests. We do also ensure that it's not discriminatory, and that the program services spaces that we have continue to meet lots of different people's viewpoints in the system. But it is an ever-changing reality for us because people move in and out of Fairfax County, and while the general kind of baseline value system of our community remains that they love the library and they want us to be here and they like using it, that we're always trying to find ways to engage with folks who maybe haven't used the library as much or don't see themselves as reflective. A classic example for us is the languages that we collect books in. I don't know, 5 years ago, it was the top 4 spoken languages in the county: English, Spanish, Vietnamese, and Korean. And maybe 3 years ago, it was not that far past the start of the pandemic, we started collecting in additional languages. So we did Mandarin, Urdu, Farsi, Tamil, and there were a couple of others. I think we did French and German too. And trying to ensure that people who maybe English is their not first spoken language also had an entry point to library services so that they could see themselves reflected and have an opportunity to read in the language of their choosing. That, of course, is tied to budget and constraints there, but we keep trying to find spots like that. So we offer story times that are bilingual in English and many other languages. The county has been working to ensure that published materials are coming out in many languages as well. So those are just 2 kind of examples that we try and hit all the sweet spots on here, but never quite managed to hit the full mark on it because there's always more need than we can maybe create access for.
Okay, thank you. Do you have anything else, Sue?
Since I'm new on the board, I'm not exactly sure how we go through the process, but if we thought of ourselves as a business and target, and I know we are targeting kind of our major audience of who usually uses the library system, do we have a way or a path to communicate with those who aren't using the library system as much? Something that you mentioned, Jessica, who don't feel represented or don't think that it's for them. I know we have our usual media outlets and things like that, but do we do any targeted type of messaging?
We usually do targeted messaging for things like programs. If we're trying to increase participation, or if we are trying to drive a certain community group towards an event or service that we offer. We don't do it that often. We have pretty good uptake in the community with library card holdership and usership, but there are definitely huge gaps in there, both community-wise of certain population groups, age range-wise, like, once people are out of high school, but before they have kids, even gender-wise. When we look at our usership, it is more strongly favored towards women than it is towards men. And I'm not going to say that we've done a great job trying to do really specific demographic dives to get more people into our facilities. Doug does an awesome job breaking it down for us. Like, here are people you should probably try and target to use the library more. But the question is, how do you reach those folks? And, the social media and the emails, they're fine. But it's really getting like a cheerleader in that community who's embedded to say, I use this, you should too. And that is incredibly dependent on local outreach, which has been more difficult during the pandemic. That's not a great excuse, but it is one thing that we continue to strive towards.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's not easy
to
it's not easy to get non-users to become users for a variety of reasons. One is knowing exactly who they are and where to find them. And in the last couple of telephone surveys we've done have indicated that the reasons why non-users don't use the library are really life choices, and they've borne themselves out over the surveys to be the same kind of things where it's a time thing that I don't have time to go to the library. They don't have what I want. I buy my books, things like that while we may be able to make some inroads on some of that, if we, there may be an advertising aspect that we could attract somebody who may not think that we offered something that we actually do. It's a struggle to actually find ways to get non-users to become users. I think it happens sometimes just organically. We don't even know that somebody decided to walk through the doors and found that they were mistaken all along, that we have all kinds of stuff for what they're after. But it's kind of a common thing in library world that turning non-users into users is difficult. And while we may know the reasons why they're not users, changing that dynamic is not easy.
Yeah, one of the, oh, sorry.
I think I was just going to say it's interesting that you know it hasn't been much good about the pandemic, but one of the things I've noticed from the few book sales we've been able to have at, say, Burke Center, where I do most of my volunteering, many people have come up to me during those sales and just saying they hadn't been to the library before, they hadn't done it. They you know, then we're giving out the COVID kits, so they came to the library, so hadn't come to sales before. They didn't realize what we had. They didn't. So in a way, we have reached out to a number of people just by being a community center during a problem like the pandemic. So.
Well, and part of the silver lining of the pandemic is so many people were forced to make lifestyle changes. We all had to think about what we valued, where we're going to put our money, you know, what kind of educational, recreational opportunities you wanted. And the library arose as an option for folks who had never thought of it before, not for our physical services, but for our digital services. And we have been able to maintain thousands of users who previously they were too busy, they already bought their books, they didn't need us. Now they saw a value because they were trying to save money or they were stuck at home or whatever. And I don't know if this will kind of see itself out through the strategic planning process, but it is a factor that we will have to continue to use. How much effort and energy are we going to transition over to supporting those folks in a digital realm? Because we have these new users and we want to keep them as well, the same way we want to do our in-person users. At the start of the pandemic, we shifted all of our book budget over to our e-collection because we couldn't get physical books. And people got used to, oh, I don't have to wait 6 months for the newest book. I can get it more quickly. We're in a scenario now where we have so many vacancies that we may be able to transition another chunk of money over to support the ebook collection. And that might bring an additional round of new people into our system digitally because it's easy access, it's quick, they don't have to wait for it. But then how do we maintain those users when that money dries up or when we are back to a post-pandemic space? I'm sorry, I am cutting into Sujatha's hand raised.
No, that's okay.
Sorry.
Sujatha's had her hand raised up there for a while, so go ahead.
I wanted to do a couple of things, Jessica, when you said some minutes back, you were talking about like the populations that don't feel themselves represented in the library. And I just want to just make it very clear, and I know you all know this, and I'm just going to say this, that very often the people who don't actually see themselves represented, you know, don't bother to tell. They are part of the population that Doug just said, don't even think that it's for them. They don't complain, they don't testify, they don't write they just assume, because the world has always been that way and life has always been that way, that they're not going to be represented. They are very often, when they see themselves represented, so shocked, surprised, and joyful at having something highlighted that is important to them that they didn't think anybody else cared about. And they discover, in fact, some people that are in positions of power and running things do care about them. There are all populations, all representations that are part of our military, for example, the Veterans Day, you know, poor people, Black people, brown people, Native people who don't see themselves represented in a lot of different ways have served in our military and very much would be part of this Veterans Day sort of push, which a lot of people who are complaining, well, do you do Veterans Day? What are you actually, what is the subtext there? Which I refuse to not acknowledge publicly. What is the subtext there when you're saying that? Like when somebody says, you know, these people and Americans, like African Americans and Americans, I mean, what are you saying there? We, you know, you just can't You just can't sit still and let that blah, blah, blah go on. It just is very offensive. It's extremely offensive to acknowledge that, and to pander to that is something, it's just exhausting, and it's 2022 and we just shouldn't have to be doing that. To that point, however, the point that Kevin made regarding hot button words, there are ways to say things without having to like alarm everybody. That is true. And when you're having a strategic plan is not necessarily a place to alarm people. It is a guiding document. It's a document of principles. They don't have to be alarming, right? To say these are the principles that we adhere to, and these are the ways we're going to protect our collection and our population, our collection and our employees via these principles, doesn't have to be alarming. If somebody says the word equity is very frustrating. Like there was a bill just proposed in the Education Committee to the House of, just now to the General Assembly about that, about divisive words, including things like equity, which is just, this is an ongoing, centuries old conversation in this country. That's nothing new. We shouldn't be afraid of it. And librarians, just like the manga, like you said, are really very brave people. And who knew it? People didn't know that, except librarians and the people who follow what librarians are actually doing, are extremely brave people. And right now, standing at the forefront of a whole onslaught that is nationwide onslaught against, and it's not intellectual freedom, it is access, right? Because then to a point that Priscilla said earlier, who doesn't have access to a book? If it's banned in the library, it's banned in school. Not my kids, if I want my kids to get mouse, I will order mouse, I'll bring it in. If you can't get it at the library, I will bring it in because I have the means to do that. So per Priscilla's point, who are the people who don't get access if you ban the book? And what does that mean regarding the intellectual divide, the information divide? Who gets the information and who doesn't get the information? I mean, we just can't not say that. When we're doing a strategic plan, there are principles involved. That's what we're doing. What do we stand for? And we have 5 years to protect. And who knows what the landscape will be in 5 years and what people will, but it's a lot of work to start from scratch and rewrite a document, right? Like you just said. So in 5 years, if the landscape is different, make this document as strong and solid a representation of our current philosophical stand, so that in 5 years, if that is no longer what the elected majority that appoints people to the board believes, it's a lot more work to undo that. And you really have to make the quiet part, say the quiet part out loud. To undo things, you'll have to say the quiet part out loud and own that. That was what I wanted to make sure we say, because we just, it's 2022 and we don't need to be pandering when in fact, these are principles for all of us, every single one of us. That's all.
Great. I appreciate that. Thank you, Suzanne. Suzanne?
Yeah, a couple things came to mind in listening to the discussion. Going back to my PTA days, there used to be community liaisons in the schools, like to the Hispanic community and the Korean community at Fairfax High. Do those people still exist, Priscilla?
Yes, there are. There's a whole office of family engagement. It's a whole department actually in the county, and they do a tremendous amount of work at the central level. And then every school has designated personnel that is looking at family engagement. It is, they generally reflect the community that attends the school, but it's an ongoing priority because every school wants to connect directly with its community. And so there may be even additional positions or special programming. There are also lots of resources in the school system, such as you can have on call if a teacher needs to call home and there may be a language issue. You can arrange for someone to be on the call as well that can make sure that the communication happens in a full manner. So there are a lot of resources, and it's not perfect. And the school system also has conversations and struggles with ensuring that all members of its community are engaged as as they would want to be, and that the school system is reaching all members of the community. That is an ongoing priority.
I guess my thought was then if this is in place, maybe we need to do some cross training between the library system, or at least have a chance for some of these folks to meet with the library to remind them those resources that are beyond the school community, but yet they would have full access to. And my other point was, when we do programming, particularly with online programming, I sometimes get emails asking me how I like the program. I don't know if they come every single time. And I can't remember if we ask a question about, is this the first program you've ever attended or something like that, to try to get a feeling for, you know, the same people come to programs over and over that interest them, but maybe you've got some first-time people, and it would probably be good to know that so that we could gear programming to those people who were captivated by something we were doing.
We, as far as I recall, so like, let's pretend this is 80% accurate right now. We've done that twice, when we've done it at key parts during this pandemic to reach out and see. Our central programming staff have reached out to see, was this your first event? What did you think of it? Are you looking for additional folks? And from those groups of people, they have reached out via email to do additional kind of info gathering about what folks want to see more of virtually. I can check with Renee and see what else they've done, but I think that's about the extent of what we've done so far.
Yeah, and I think pre-pandemic, we would target certain individual programs as well in person, and we'd have a paper survey for them to quickly fill out kind of on their way out the door.
Right.
You know, that's always a dicey thing because people want to get out of there. They're off and going, and staying behind and filling something out is not really the first thing on their minds. But we have asked those kinds of things in the past. And I'm sure we're getting to where electronically there's easier ways to do it maybe, and get that kind of information.
Yeah, it seems like when you get an email, you know, 20 minutes after a program's ended, you're likely to answer it, well, it's all fresh in your mind. But I'm glad that you're doing that kind of thing to try and determine what catches new users' attention.
Great idea. Okay, well, we've had some great discussion here and really good ideas. I don't have anything further to say. I think I'm looking at the agenda here, make sure. Yeah, okay, we've gotten everything. The next meeting, we don't know, but you'll send out information on that. Does anybody else have anything else to add today? This is great. I really appreciate you spending time here. Anything? No? Jessica,
I'm just
do you have
glad
anything?
to know we're not.
I'm sorry.
I'm glad to know we're not going to reinvent the whole plan, that we
That
can
was-
build on it, because it was a lot of blood, sweat, and tears last
Right,
time.
exactly. That's what, when Fran asked me to do this, I went, are you nuts? Yeah, but yeah.
It was a lot of
I'm gonna
words.
rewrite that thing.
It was kind of fun on the fly, but
Yeah.
we've got a good starting place.
Excellent.
I appreciate it. Okay, do you have anything else to say, Jess?
Not a mucho. I will be in touch about setting up another meeting, and Doug and I will chat about getting the staff.
Okay. All right. Well, thanks, everybody. Kevin, very nice meeting you, and Doug, too. I haven't met you before. You're not new, but still, you've done that.
My pleasure.
And appreciate it. And we'll see you, I guess, at the, some of you at least, at the next actual board meeting. Okay.
See y'all soon.
Thanks.
Okay.
All right. Bye-bye.
Thanks.
Have a